Good morning. Thanks for having me. My name is Danny Albert. I am a person in long-term recovery. And for me, that means I haven't had a drink or a drug since April 30th, 2017. So God willing, a little over 2 months from now, I'll be celebrating 8 years. Also the founder of an organization called Hero in the Fight. It's a grassroots organization created to break the stigma of addiction and let people know that they never have to be alone in anything. And I'm also the general manager and at the end of this month, operating partner of the Harrisburg Melting Pot restaurant.
Fantastic. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to go back to Danny and get to Danny's talk. So Danny, whenever you're ready, go ahead and begin.
Awesome. Thank you. First off, it's an honor to be asked to do this. A little over 8 years ago, if you would have told me I would be sitting here about to share my story on Project Echo, I wouldn't have believed you. So, I hope as you listen to my story, if you have any questions, I'm going to start with my recovery story, pause for questions, and then go into my employer story. But you can go to the next slide there. So this is just a little bit about Hero in the Fight. That's a close friend of mine, Chris. And we have a website, www.herointhefight.org. We partner with Dauphin County Drug and Alcohol to host events. A lot of those events are created just to let people know you can have fun in life without the use of a substance. Because for many years, myself and many others didn't think that was possible. Next slide. All right. One thing we do is we go into schools, we talk to students. You don't realize how impactful it is when you're in a situation where you can create an atmosphere with conversation. Our youth are going through things at home. They're going through things in life. And the greatest part about going into a school and talking to students is the portion where we open it up to questions. We've had experiences where one student raised his hand, talked for 4 minutes on the fact that his uncle passed away. Creating that environment where people are speaking about things that they're going through is extremely important in general, but especially at schools. So, our mission is to break the stigma associated with addiction, raise awareness towards the impact it has in our communities, and our goal is to provide support for different avenues of recovery. It's our belief that reaching out for help empowers one to create change. Next slide. And then that's our website. I'm not sure if there's any more slides after that one.
No, that's it.
All right. And I know I powered through the slideshow, but I think it's extremely important. My story is one of grace, and I'm lucky to be alive. I grew up in my hometown, Steelton, Pennsylvania. It's a small town with a lot of heart. My last name is Albert, and a lot of my cousins coached the younger generation's basketball teams. My cousin Jason, who just passed away, Eddie, who passed, Joe, all of these guys, like, I thought were invincible. And it really made me, if I knew it was cool to be an Albert, but like they made it extremely cool, right? And I looked up to them. And in that process, I put this pressure on myself that I needed to be great at basketball. And I wasn't great, right? Like, but at a young age, I put pressure on me that no one else put on me, that I didn't talk about. My dad worked for Appleton Papers. He worked every day at a job. And early on in life, I saw all the things he didn't show up for. And later on in life, I realized he did that because he loved us. And as a kid, I couldn't see that. But my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she would cook dinner at like breakfast time, and we would come home from school and it would be reheated dinners that we sat in front of the TV, and that was like family dinner, right? So my family dinner didn't look like a lot of other people's family dinners, and that was just my experience. And as I said before, I was always looking at the things that I didn't have rather than the things I did have. And I have a younger brother, his name's Shane. um, I always try to be the protector. And elementary school, the first time I had a substance, I was introduced probably around the age of 9 or 10. It was, my dad had a natural ice, which I don't even know if they make that anymore, but it was terrible. And I thought, I will never drink this again. And, a few months later, I would go down crayfishing with my friends. We'd ride our bikes everywhere, ride our bikes all over the place to the point where you would leave the house and not come home till later. And I have a daughter now, and it's like, that would weigh so heavy on my heart, just like not knowing where she's at. But good thing we have technology nowadays. But we would go back home from catching crayfish, and his dad would give us Yingling Lager to cook the crayfish, and we didn't use it to cook the crayfish. We drank it, and that's back when I had to be home before the street lights came on. And one night it was dark and the street lights were on and I didn't go home. And my dad drove around the block to find me. And I remember talking over the top of the window so he wouldn't smell my breath. And he didn't notice it. But we're talking elementary school during these times. And first time I was presented with uh, marijuana was also, my dad, he wanted to make sure that I didn't go into high school and be peer pressured from somebody else. Like he felt it would be safe if I was with him. And I told him I didn't want to, and he was very proud of me. And this was him parenting the best way he knew how. So, I say all these things to help give you an idea of the life that I lived and I had, and many others like me. We grew up, what happened in the house stays in the house. You didn't talk about the things you were going through. And that is the essence of stigma. And, I thought being tough was not talking about the things that you were going through because I saw my dad work hard and not talk about his feelings. So I thought that that was toughness. And that was just my perspective. And all of these things I didn't talk about to anybody. And then, going from elementary school to high school, my number one thing I wanted to do, I shifted since basketball wasn't the play for me, was baseball. And, I put in the work, like seventh, eighth grade, I worked out every day. I, was on the all-star teams and I tried out for varsity in the ninth grade. And we had this freshman, sophomore versus junior, senior baseball game scrimmage before the season, and I hit a grand slam in that. And I started varsity in the ninth grade. And, I remember like my ego at that time, right? Like here I was starting varsity where I had 11th graders becoming seniors now sitting the bench. And I took one of their positions, and two of my other friends in the ninth grade took some other positions. And um, that this atmosphere of partying on the weekends um, became normal for me. And as we went from ninth and 10th into 11th and 12th, and there came a day, I'm not sure when, but it was in that, where partying on the weekends turned it into waking up and needing a substance every day. And I didn't have a job, but I needed to fuel that, craving for a substance. And what we did is I started robbing houses. And I was the guy that this is what we'd drive around the block, see the house that the grass wasn't cut, that the newspaper wasn't moved, and we would go back the next day, and I would go up to that house and knock on the door. And sometimes people answered, and sometimes people didn't. And um, one time we took a gun from the house, and um, a friend of mine borrowed it and was pulled over, and it was all traced back. And I went to court for it, and that was my, accomplice to burglary with a deadly weapon. And there I was, 17, juvenile Schaffner detention center. Um, and what would end up being on probation, off and on from like the age of 17 to 32, in this process. And what I did then is I put myself in uncomfortable positions because I wanted to manipulate situations, and I leaned on all of my qualities that I had in a negative way. And in that, I would skip school until about second or third period when I needed to be there for English class, stay for social studies. Then I would leave again, skip, lunch period um, and come back for the other classes that I need to and leave early. And I was doing this senior year. Even though I did that, everyone around me saw that. I still managed to get a full ride academic scholarship to Millersville University. All right. And because there's a few things that I'm a really good writer, and I have this skill at studying the night before for a test and then waking up to the point where people would cheat off of me at times. And I didn't realize all of the great qualities I had during that time. Um, you know, Fast forward a little bit, we'll go to Millersville University, and I basically failed out and lost that scholarship. Substance use was more prevalent at that time. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Sorry. I thought maybe I froze. um, so what happened when I failed out of school, my parents picked me up, they drove out, and I remember that ride home in the back seat of my mom. She drove and I was in the back seat, and I thought, I proved everyone right that didn't believe in me, that said that I didn't deserve everything that I did have. And I struggled to look at myself in the mirror. Like, I hated who I was. I hated the person I had become. Um, and I was going back home to live with my parents when I thought that that was something that I would never do again. And at that time, I got a job in the restaurant industry. And I'll talk more about that a little later, but I will say that my passion for guest service came because I wanted to elevate the experience of other people because of the experience that I never felt. All right. That's why I'm good at what I do in the restaurant industry. And um, I would go on to have a lot of nevers happen. And like, I'd never been late for a job. I've never been fired from a job. All of those things started happening, and the pain got worse and worse. And I had a daughter, her name's Caden. I actually looked at a card that she wrote for me before I left for work today, and it says, "Dad, you're lucky because you have me and you're reading this card." It was just really awesome. And it really wasn't it was like a sentence, and it was so powerful when I slow down to really listen to what that says. I am lucky. And at that time, when I found out that her mom was pregnant, um, she told me to come over to the house. She had something she wanted to talk to me about. Her parents looked out the door to see my reaction when she told me, and I got up and I walked away because I didn't believe it. I couldn't take care of myself. How was I going to take care of a kid? And I drove off, and I drove back. Um, and that spiral got deeper, and my substance use switched to opiate use, and some more never started happening. I'd never IV use, and I'd get one day my mom came into the bathroom and I was laying on the floor, and she tried to wake me up, and she walked away to call 911, but she could never dial the number because she thought in that moment that I would pass away. So she'd come back and try to wake me up. And luckily, 9 minutes later, I woke up. The things that we put the people that care about us most through, and we don't even realize. I didn't even realize that that moment happened until a few years ago when she shared that with me. Um, After that, I came home one day and my dad said, "You're not coming in this house. I don't want your mom to have to watch you die." And I looked at my mom and she turned away. And my mom is that person that she was always there for me. And when she couldn't be there for me, I knew it was bad. And my daughter's mom moved to Philly with my daughter out of protection. because I would sit there and say that my daughter was the safest with me, yet I was always driving under the influence and taking her to situations that were very not okay to have her. But I didn't realize it because I was delusional during that time. I'd go on to lose her at Hershey Park. Um, the list is long on the harm that I caused in this process. And ultimately I became homeless. I lived out of the back of my Chevy Blazer. I would park in different hotel parking lots. Um, and my thoughts were, if someone comes and sees me, I'll say, oh, well, I work at this job that I didn't work at, or I always had like this manipulative story. Um, and it was all bad. I would end up going to treatment more than once. Um, and the second time in treatment, I had a phone call with my daughter, and she said, Dad, I just don't want you to be sick anymore. And I thought, this is more than me now. And I would write my daughter's name on my left hand. And in that treatment facility, my highs were high and my lows were low. And, there was a situation where we were at lunch and they would give you free liquid lightning energy drinks. And I grabbed 3 of them. And a guy comes over and he says, there were none left for me, but yet you have 3. And I remember thinking, who is he talking to me like that? And I looked at my hand and I thought, calm down. You have 3. Why not just give him one? And I say that because my clear thinking was not clear. And my daughter was my energy in the beginning. Like I needed to do it for more than me because I wasn't enough for it. Like I didn't care to be alive anymore, but I cared too much about using the substance to want to kill myself. That's where I was. That's where substances took me. It took everyone I cared about away from me. The people I loved the most had to protect themselves. I stole my mom's ring. I sold it. I stole my dad's Xbox. I sold it. I did retail theft charges. I got caught for all this stuff. I made amends through the court system. I paid people back. And I'll get into more about how I've made amends since then. And um, you know, I was in that treatment facility and there was a guy that said, you shouldn't move home with your parents. You should move into a recovery house. And I thought, that's a great idea. I can't move back home because I could walk down the street. And I called my parents really proud. I'm going to move into a recovery house. And they said, Dan, if you don't move back in with us, we can't support you anymore. And that was a really hard decision because I was faced with, how am I going to pay for first month's rent for a recovery house or 2 weeks that they needed? How am I going to put groceries in the fridge? But I knew the decision I had to make. And the reason my parents said that is because they thought if they watched over me that I would be safe. I was on a path of destruction. My mom probably thought that I was going to die if I didn't move back home because of their experiences with me. But I made that hard decision because I was in a place where I was ready to take any suggestion. And I moved into that recovery house and I would walk down to a job, Cork and Fork restaurant, and I would walk to 12-step recovery meetings and I would listen to what people who were successful in my eyes, what they were doing. And I tried to be like them and tried to do the things they were doing. Um, in that process, I had goals. I set a 60-day goal, a 90-day goal. My 60-day goal was like, get a gym membership, get a bank, a lot of things that most people had and were normal that like I didn't know how to live, right? And my 90-day goal was to take my daughter to Hershey Park. And I made it to that 90 days. And we got to Hershey Park, and I'll never forget it. We go on the Super Duper Looper. She's 5 years old. She's not tall enough to get on this ride. So before we go in, I put her hair in a bun, and she's, so scared before we get on this ride. And I told her, I want to take a picture of you. Give me your brave face. And I still have that picture. And I thought on that ride, here I am asking her to be brave. I need to be brave myself. And I would journal at night. I would listen to motivational speaker tapes. And, I just did not want to be the person I was. I wanted to be the person that I always wanted to be. And I tried to walk more like that every single day. And some days I would fall short, and the next day was always a new day. And in that process, there were people that saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And about 4 or 5 months in, I went up to Negley Park. It overlooks the city of Harrisburg. I was on a swing, and I thought, I don't want anybody to have to go through anything that I have. And I decided, I want to make a shirt for people to wear it with pride, and to help break stigma, to let people know that they don't have to be alone in anything. And it said, be a hero in the fight against addiction. And I put these shirts in a backpack, and I walked down to the Capitol for Advocacy Day in September. And I walked up to a table that the Raise Project organization sat at, and I asked if I could have a seat at their table. And I wanted to sell these shirts and give the proceeds to them for Recovery House scholarships, so that other people could make that hard decision um, a little easier. And they gave me a seat at that table. And I talked to Val Spring, late Val Spring, who passed. She had a coffee shop in Lemoyne, and she loved what we were doing, and she allowed us to host our first event. And it was during Halloween. And someone wrote in a petition for Daystar Treatment Facility that they wanted to be there, and they let all the clients come to this, recovery event. And I thought, wow, we could be a source of strength for other people just from an idea. And that made my holidays easier too, because my holidays weren't great. My first Christmas, I had my daughter for about 30 minutes in a recovery house. It was, those are the things you go through when you burn bridges for a long time, and people want to protect themselves. And but in that, there is always someone there that cares. It's just a matter of speaking about what you're going through, because that's the real strength. That's the strength that I never realized was strength. Everything that I had preconceived in my experience in life, I had it all wrong. I looked at things the wrong way. And recovery has given me the opportunity to see things through this lens. I'm going to pause for questions. As I get into my employer experience, this will evolve a little more. But, in recovery, I've switched my position of put myself in uncomfortable positions to speaking at things like this, to jumping out of an airplane and facing fear, to climbing over rappelling over the edge of a building for people in recovery, to snowboarding, which I never did before, doing things that are fun in life without the use of a substance.